All right, let's just jump right in. Joseph Stalin. We all know the name, right? The man of steel. His life, well, that's all in the history books. But what about his death? What happens after? That's what we're diving into today, a really fascinating thought experiment, a kind of speculative story that imagines what happens when a tyrant like that finally meets his end. It's a journey into a reckoning that's, well, it's made just for him.
You know, it's a question people have asked forever. What happens when a tyrant dies? Does all that power just poof, disappear? Is that it? Story over? Well, this particular take we're exploring has a totally different answer. It basically says, oh no, the real story is just getting started.
And this is the absolute heart of the idea. We're not talking about courts or trials here on Earth. Forget all that. This is about a totally different kind of justice. It's not about revenge. Not really. It's about being forced to look in the mirror. A kind of justice where you have to face every single thing you've ever done.
So, to get where we're going, we've got to start with how it all ended for him in the real world. So, picture this. March 5th, 1953. The Iron One, Stalin himself, is found on the floor of his country house unconscious. And for hours, literally hours, nobody dared to go in. They were that terrified of him even while he was dying.
I mean, just think about the irony of that for a second. This is a man who controlled a huge chunk of the planet, who held millions of lives in his hands. And how does he go out? Utterly helpless and completely alone on a rug. It's like a chilling little preview of the kind of isolation that's waiting for him.
And right here, this is where we leave the history books behind and step into the what if. He doesn't go down into some fiery pit. Nope. His version of hell is something way more personal and honestly, way more bureaucratic.
He finds himself in a place called the Archive. Just try to picture it. Endless, gray corridors of filing cabinets stretching on forever. The whole place smells like old burnt paper. You see these faded maps on the walls, marking out famines and deportations. This isn't a prison made of stone and bars. It's a prison built out of the very memories he spent his life trying to destroy.
And then, a voice cuts through the quiet. It's cold, it's empty. And it's not accusing him of anything, it's just stating a fact. He's finally home, in the world he himself built. And his judgment, well, it's about to start.
Okay, so this is super important to get. The whole thing is built around the idea of poetic justice, right? The punishment isn't about an eye for an eye. It's about making the guy experience the exact kind of cruelty he dished out. It's like holding up a perfect mirror to him, not just hitting him with a hammer.
So, how does it all play out? How does this reckoning actually work? Well, it uses the very tool he perfected to control everyone, the file. I mean, he built an entire state where a person's whole life could be squashed down into a dossier, a simple report, just a name on a list. And now he's the one who has to read them all.
He opens the first file, and boom. He's hit with a number it's just almost impossible to wrap your head around. Over 7 million people. The victims of the Holodomor, that terrible famine in Ukraine that his policies created. You know, in life, a number that big is just a statistic, right? It's abstract. But not here. Not anymore.
And isn't this something? He's the one who famously said it. That quote was basically his operating system, right? It's how he was able to commit horrors on such a massive scale. And this story just perfectly captures the punishment by turning his own ice-cold logic right back on him.
See, here in the archive, that big number gets completely shattered. Every single page in that file is a person, a name, a face, a life story. Oksana, Dimitro, Lydia. All of a sudden, 7 million isn't a statistic. It's 7 million individual tragedies, one after another, and he has to witness every last one.
But the torment isn't just about facing his victims. Oh no, it's also coming from inside his own head. That deep, gnawing paranoia that kept him in power, that made him trust absolutely no one, well now it's his own private torture chamber. He's hearing whispers in the silence, seeing enemies in every shadow.
And what happens is his whole identity just starts to crack and fall apart. The Stalin persona, that whole man of steel, unfeeling dictator thing, it just crumbles. And what's left underneath? Just the man. Paranoid, totally alone. And haunted by Vano, which was his childhood nickname. The little boy from Georgia who, believe it or not, once dreamed of being a priest.
But you want to know the final nail in the coffin? The ultimate rejection comes from the one person whose approval he wanted more than anything. In this strange afterlife, Lenin himself shows up to confront him. Imagine that. His entire life's work, everything he built, it's all declared a fraud by his own hero. This is way beyond political failure. This is total, spiritual annihilation.
So, where does this all lead? What's the final sentence? What could possibly be the ultimate punishment for a man who needed total control over everything, over history, over people, over truth itself?
Well, first, he has to watch as his legacy on Earth is systematically torn apart. His own successor stands up and denounces his crimes. His body gets yanked out of its place of honor next to Lenin, and then, the final blow, the Soviet Union, his entire empire, just collapses. You see, his biggest fear was never death. It was being forgotten. It was becoming irrelevant.
And that brings us to the final, perfect, terrible punishment. He becomes a clerk. Clerk number 0000000 in an endless, soul-crushing bureaucracy. And what's his job for all of eternity? To process the appeals from his own victims, to remember the order that he himself gave for their fate, and then to stamp each and every file denied. He's become a tiny, powerless cog in the exact machine of terror he created.
But here's the thing. The story doesn't actually end with him. The camera kind of pans away, and in this final, imagined scene, you see the souls of his victims. And they aren't crying. They're celebrating. They're singing. They're finally free. And you realize, the ultimate justice wasn't about his suffering. It was about their survival. And that's really the big takeaway here, isn't it? True justice, at least in this version of the story, isn't about paying back pain with more pain. It's about the absolute triumph of the human spirit. It's that moment when a poem outlasts a propaganda poster, when a whispered song is louder than a scream, and when the tyrant finally becomes what he feared most, completely and utterly irrelevant.
So, that leaves us with one last question to think about, right? What truly outlives a legacy built on pure fear? Power can build massive empires, sure. But maybe, just maybe, what really lasts forever are the things it can never, ever touch. Things like memory and art and that stubborn, defiant joy of the human spirit.